Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This video will be part 3 of the 4-part series where we build a phrase guessing game using Angular. In this video, we will be continuing where we left off in our game and adding an on-screen keyboard for our users to interact with. If you have not seen the previous videos in this series, then you should pause this video and go watch them first. I will have a link in the description below where you can go check them out. Alright, let's jump back into it. So now, back to the example, let's add the keyboard. So back in VS Code, I actually want to create a keyboard component. So I'm going to open up a new window of the terminal and let's do ng generate component, and it's going to be called keyboard, and let's run that. So now we can see that we have the keyboard component, and like before, I'm going to delete the unit tests. And then we'll open up the keyboard. A little bit of rearranging here. And let's just insert the keyboard as is and see that it works. So back in the app component, below the phrase and before the overlay, we're just going to add in the app keyboard. Save that, come back to the browser, and we can see that keyboard works. So now, in the keyboard HTML, let's replace this with what we actually want. So I'm going to do a div with a class of keyboard. And then I'm going to have each row of keys be in a div. So we'll do key row. And then each key will just be a button. And then over in the keyboard component, TypeScript, we need to build out all of the buttons. So we're going to have a property of keyboard. It's equal to an object, and that object is going to have a property of rows, which is an array, so we have multiple rows, and then each row will be an array of the letters, which is going to be an object with value of what the actual letter is. So starting at the top of the keyboard, this one would be Q, and due to the behavior where we want to disable that button, we're going to have a disabled property, and it's going to be false by default. Then beside Q is going to be W. And then just for time's sake, we'll have another row, and it's going to have exactly the same thing, but it will start with the letter A. So I already have this typed out, so I'm just going to copy and paste from another window. Okay, so we can see that we have Q, W, E, R, all the way down through P, and then the next row of letters, and the next row being the third row on the keyboard. So back in the HTML, we're going to do an ng4 on the key row. So ng4, and it's for each row of keyboard dot row, rows. And then inside each row, we're going to do an ng4 on the keys. So let letter of row. So each letter in the row. And then the text of the button will be letter dot value. So let's save that and see what that looks like. If we quick start we could see here's our beginnings of our keyboard. So in the Sass, we will have the keyboard div, and inside the keyboard is the key row. And we want to set that to display flex, and then justify content like before to center. So now we can see that the keyboard is center in the page, and also all the rows are center, making it look more like a traditional keyboard. Now let's set the button to have a bigger font. So let's do font size of 32 pixels. And a little space between the buttons would be nice. So let's do a margin of 5 pixels and a width of 50 pixels. So this is so that they'll all have the same width. So coming back to the browser, we can now see that here's what our keyboard looks like. Now let's set it up to where when you click on a letter, it will actually do something. So let's come down and create a method, click letter, and it's going to take a letter, and we'll just set it to any so that VS Code doesn't bug us. And since the letter was clicked, we want to do letter.disabled equals true, because we don't want the user to click the letter again. And then also let's just log out the letter. So letter.value. And then over here on the button, let's set up the click event. And it's going to be click letter, and pass it the letter from the ng4. So save that and come back. Now, if we click on one of these letters, we can see that the console log is happening, but they're not being disabled. Back in VS Code, we are going to set disabled to letter.disabled. And now we can see that when we click on the letters, they get disabled. Now back in the keyboard component, we don't want to log out the letter. We want to do something with it. We want to compare that letter that was pressed to the letters in the phrase. But the phrase is in the app component TypeScript, and the letter is in the keyboard component. So what we need is an event emitter. So let's do an output. And it's going to be letter clicked equals new event emitter. And it's going to be a type of string, which will be the letter that was clicked. And then down in the click letter method, let's remove that and do this dot letter clicked dot emit letter dot value. And then in the app component for app keyboard, let's do letter clicked, and we're going to call a method that we haven't created yet called check letter. and pass it the event. Okay, and when I save that, I get an error. That's because that's not created yet. So let's come back to the app component TS and create check letter. Now if we save that, oh, it needs to actually take the letter. So it's of type string, and there we go. So now in the check letter method, let's just make sure that works. So let's log out the letter and then come back to the browser and press M, and we can see that M was logged to the browser or to the console, and that came from the app component on line 37, which is this. So now let's check that letter that the user clicked and see if it's in the phrase. So to do that, we are going to do this dot current phrase dot for each to loop over each letter in the phrase, and it's going to be phrase letter. We'll just set that to an any. And an arrow function. And then inside this function, we're going to say if phrase letter dot value is equal to letter dot is equal to letter, then phrase letter dot hidden equals false. So what this is saying is if the letter that the user clicked matches the letter for each iteration, then unhide that particular letter. So let's try that out. We'll save that, come back, and this one is hello world, so let's hit H, and it doesn't work. Why is that? Let's try the E. That one works. So the problem here is hello world, the H in hello world is a capital H, and the letter that we clicked on is a lowercase h. And the way to fix that is to do two lowercase on each of these. Even though letter is already in lowercase, it's just safer to do this. And we'll save that and come back. And now if we press the H, we can see that that's working correctly. And that concludes the end of part 3 in this 4-part series. I hope you've enjoyed adding the on-screen keyboard with me. If so, let me know by hitting that like button down below. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and bell icon so that you do not miss the next video in this series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.